Welcome. This is Monty. I'm owner of a small business. It's a state-of-the-art surveillance. We sell state-of-the-art surveillance and security equipment and law enforcement grade equipment, bug detectors, trackers, anti-terrorist products. They're all lifetime guaranteed and warranted. And we're available 24/7 for tech sales and customer support. We've been in business for like 15 to 20 years at least. One of the things that interests me outside of the business, outside of running my business and working with customers and all that, is examining history, for instance, amongst other things. Okay, like everyone else, I have a lot of interest. One thing that was brought to my attention was there was a term called Black Wall Street, and found it very intriguing. Did some researching online and such, and found a number of videos and some documentaries and a lot of information. I'm presently putting together a blog, but right now we're going to be blabbing about Black Wall Street. The first episode focused on a historical analysis and perspective. This particular episode, if you will, is going to be focusing on controlling the narrative. In other words, when we have a situation whereby we have something that's controversial as a Black Wall Street, a lot of people are going to think all sorts of things will come to mind. Why are they doing this? Why now? What are they trying to accomplish? Is this going to be some sort of separation from this group, from that group, or something? And so, yeah, we want to paint a certain narrative ahead of all of the labeling and categorizing and all that. There's a certain narrative that a message that I want to get across, and that's what this particular blab is all about: controlling the narrative, getting a certain word out, a certain perspective, and that way, when we when we're looking back at this blab and the other blabs or whatever, we have a certain context to frame what we're trying to get out versus what other people may be trying to label or something like that. Just we want to eliminate confusion. Okay, there's a certain message we're trying to convey, and that's the message we want to get across. And then people can draw their own interpretations on them, themselves. But we want to make absolutely sure that we have a certain message to convey. The message that we want to convey is about Black Wall Street, this particular event that occurred in the 1920s. And let me just check the messages real fast. Good question there. Right. Yeah, I'm just reading a few comments on the side here. We'll address those definitely. And you can proceed the questions with a /Q, I think, and then a space. So anyway, to summarize, and you guys feel free to look at the playbacks of the first episode and get an idea in terms of what lays the foundation for this episode. Okay, so transitioning from that one to this one, we just want to say that there was a particular event that was really interesting. There was a model, actually. This is the way I want to look at it. There was a model of capitalism in a particular section of town called Greenwood, Oklahoma, where a number of enterprising individuals who happen to be Black, in my opinion, I think they founded what the equivalent of the first Wall Street. Okay, now besides looking at the color of the skin of the individuals, we have what could quite possibly be the first Wall Street. Okay, because the Wall Street that we typically hear about in the papers talks about a Wall Street that is predominated by whites, and it's based in New York. Okay, so if we look at the typically when you query or do a search on Wall Street, that's what's normally brought to anyone's attention. Okay, and for the most part, that's the only Wall Street that most people are ever going to know about. But I think it's very intriguing that Wall Street that is brought to our attention in the main media. I think it was, let's see, when was that? In the early years. I have to take a look because there was a certain area of town. I think it was in New York, Buttonwood area or something, where they basically founded that the typical Main Street version of Wall Street. Let's see. Yeah, that was the Wall Street that most people are going to be familiar with. And that was established approximately, I think, 1792. Um, but that was the type of Wall Street that, not to say slight anything against it, but we typically look toward that one, for better or for worse, as the original or impetus for the capitalistic uh, way that we invest in companies, buy shares, and all of that, allocate capital, for instance. That's typically what we think about when we think about the Wall Street, the typical in a typical sense, originating again based in Manhattan, or I think in New York. But there, believe it or not, there was a Black Wall Street in Greenwood, Oklahoma, and that Wall Street really was a different type of Wall Street because it was relegated mainly and controlled mainly by the blacks in Oklahoma. And they did very well, and they seem to have set in place something that attracted, again, a lot of people to that area, and did just fine. So that's where we're going to focus in today. And let me see, I'm going to take a look at a few of these questions on the side, and then we'll expound a little bit on the narrative. Just one moment. Yes. So the question was, how much damage did the bombings do? Just so you guys will know who are tuning into this blab at this point. There was a great deal of arson, a great deal of theft and robbing, killings, lynchings, etc., that occurred in the in Greenwood, Oklahoma, in the 1920s, when this rioting happened, and the bombings decimated the entire town. Okay, the whites took advantage of an opportunity to drive out the blacks out of Greenwood, and loot their homes, loot their businesses, and take everything of value, transferring it, from the blacks to the whites, and while at the same time driving and decimating, driving the blacks out and decimating their business and their personal and business properties. So we have an open seat. I don't know if anybody wants to come in, but we do have an open seat. Let me see if any of the other people that I know on Blab might also want to join us. But go ahead and post any questions that you guys have while I check and see whether or not there's any specific people that may have a different perspective, or want to give us a little bit more of a perspective on Blab that can join this group here. Okay, how much damage? Okay, we still got that one. Okay, yeah, I think we've, yeah, some of the other people may not be on Blab right now, but yeah, going back to this particular situation, controlling the narrative, just so you guys will understand, that was a very historic event, in a very monumental accomplishment, because there were thriving businesses. that were being established in Greenwood. And let's see, I think what drove a lot of that um, economic activity and prosperity was the oil boom that occurred in Oklahoma at the time. And so, yeah, a lot of people were prospering, and the Black community decided to take a lot of that money and channel it into that particular area, and they did quite well with it. And let's see if we get some figures for you. For instance, there was a total of 600 businesses. You gotta keep this in perspective. There were this is like the 1920s approximately, but there were in a small section of a town, Greenwood, they managed to have 600 businesses, 21 churches, 21 restaurants, 30 grocery stores, 2 movie theaters, 6 private airplanes, plus a hospital. What is that? A hospital, a bank, a post office, schools, libraries, law offices, and even a bus system. So it looks like they achieved a great deal, considering that a lot of these people were, were told that they could never amount to anything, could never accomplish anything, and that they should just be maids and butlers and shoe shiners or something. But it looks like left to their own devices, a lot of these Blacks, they proved that if you give us the opportunity to do the same things that everybody else was doing, that they could find a way to become prosperous and very successful. There was a number of mansions, for instance, that a lot of these business owners in Greenwood had acquired for themselves, or built as a result of their prosperity. So again, I don't think we want to take for granted the fact that these guys did very well, and there was some substantial accomplishments. Even in today's standards, a lot of these guys were millionaires, and if you take account for inflation, and look at what look at their net worth in terms of what it would be in today's dollars, you probably find, who knows, maybe billionaires or something. But yeah, we need to really take a look at what happens when people start prospering, and other people who aren't quite used to seeing these things occur on a grand scale, they get nervous. So so that they kind of, the whites kind of like thought, okay, let's put an end to this. And there was a great deal of collusion, unfortunately, even with the federal government agencies at the time, and police forces and such. Insurance companies wanted to help the Blacks restore their homes, restore their businesses, and file claims. But the city founders of Tulsa prevented anyone from assisting the Blacks. The philanthropy organizations, the insurance companies. Matter of fact, during the rioting, a lot of the telephone lines and communications connections, whatever, were severed, so as to keep the outside communities from knowing what was going on and intervening. So this was a very concerted effort at sort of like they wanted to redistribute the wealth from the Blacks to the whites. Believe it or not, we talk about wealth redistribution right now, but this was the opposite of what we typically talk about right now. This because again, the poor people were supposed to be the Blacks, and they had significant accomplishments and property and assets, and that was taken from them by force. So that's what they were up against at that, during that time. So that's a form of wealth redistribution that we don't hear about typically in the mass media. So yeah, I encourage you guys to really take a look at some of those videos. I think, let me see, trying to think. Okay, what I'll probably have to do is the next episode, I'll try to feature more prominently, well, let me see here, a blog with a video playlist where we can actually take a look at some of the specifics in terms of what happened. Let's see. Why didn't they? Let's see. Why didn't the police do anything to help them? Well, see, at the time, yeah, that's a good question. At the time, with the majority of the citizens in Tulsa being white, and you know, their police were friends and relatives and associates to the whites, right? So they had a vested interest. Everyone, were basically taking advantage of this opportunity again, because you had a lot of racial divide, a major racial division. If you weren't white, then you weren't supposed to be able to accomplish anything, achieve anything great. So yeah, basically that's what was happening. The police stood by, and during the rioting, they protected the white homes and the white businesses, and at the same time, they allowed the mobs from the white communities to go into the black areas and loot and steal and take everything and kill people. So yeah, the police were colluding to a great extent, because again, with such a racial division going on at the time, that's unfortunately that's how they handled those situations. So let me see, that's what they were up against. That's a very good question, by the way. But yeah, but the police were involved just as much as anybody else at that time. Let's see. And let's see, what else do we have here? But yeah, for anybody that watches, whoops, hold on. And anyone that watches the first episode, we're given very good context, I think, in terms of what happened and a lot of the issues that we're raising now. We went to I think we went into detail during the first episode, so you may want to take a look at that one, and that should really give you a good idea in terms of how this is framed as well, how this whole conversation is to be framed as well. So I think that's going to help a lot too. Those of you who want to find out more about so the origins of how the problem, how we got to this point in the first place. But that was a good question, a very good question. And see, and how do you think we can create more successful and wealthy Black communities? Well, I think we first have to identify that there is a problem that needs to be addressed. Sometimes when you're coming up with a solution, it's one thing to come up with a solution, but you have to articulate why, the why. In other words, do we even realize in the Black community that we need to do something? Is there a problem, right, that needs to be addressed? Sometimes you don't rally people very effectively unless you identify a problem that needs to be resolved. And unfortunately, a lot of people in the Black communities, they see the exceptions. They see the entertainers, the major athletes, the certain celebrities or something, and they think, well, we have some very good examples, and so we don't need to do anything because obviously if they can do it, I can do it, right? But we don't realize that you just can't look at those exceptions and assume that those opportunities uh, really extend to a larger group of people who really need, to be given the opportunity to succeed to those great lofty levels. So anyway, I think where we need to start is just to make sure people understand that there's going to be some major benefits um, as a result of us having communities, having sections of town where we can and have dollars invest and circulate in those stores and businesses, and um, something called the turnover rate, and as it pertains to the dollars that go from hand to hand in a community. The longer those dollars uh, turn over from one person to the next before it exits the community, usually that's a better indication, a better indicator of whether or not you've actually accomplished anything substantial. So you always want to have your money circulate within your community for as long as possible before it leaves the community. So that's what we need to concentrate on. If I have $1 and I'm going from one store to the next, when that store gets my dollars, can they buy from a distributor and keep that within the Black community? And can a distributor buy from a manufacturer who's Black? And can the manufacturer borrow from a bank who's Black? And a bank, um, it goes on. It goes on and on. So the idea is, yeah, keep the dollars within the community, because all of the partners, all of the suppliers, all of the vendors, etc., if they can be the same ethnicity, then that's usually a very good measure that you're accomplishing something great. Because again, um, you have to have a whole network, a whole web of people that are controlling every aspect. Again, from the banking to the services rendered, suppliers, vendors, shipping companies, growers, professional ancillary services like accountants, bookkeepers, financial planners, etc. The more you have in the way of support systems, that's really going to make a big difference. So uh, that was an excellent question, and that is really how you get to the point where you have successful communities. By having a support system in place that actually allows you to keep that money within the community for as long as possible before it leaves those communities. So that's a very good question, and that's something that people take for granted when it comes to determining whether or not a community is going to survive and thrive for very long. So that's something that we need to work towards. So yeah, we'll first identify the problems, communicate the problems first, and then eventually we get to the point where more people will rally towards the solution. But I don't think a lot of the Blacks know. For instance, we don't know that there is a major problem in terms of us not having that support infrastructure, that vertical and horizontal integration of businesses and services that work together for those particular goals. Very good question. Let's see. Let's see. So while you guys present your comments, etc., I'm just going to continue promoting this particular blab and the other blab that we did the other day, yesterday. and to make sure that people understand there's a part 1 and a part 2, and hopefully a part 3. Just so you know, part 3, we're probably going to focus on just what you're referring to earlier. You know, we need some practical ideas, a way to implement these ideas, and some practical things that we can do. Even if it's just submitting links to businesses, if they're financial planners, accountants, or banks, credit unions, etc. I think a lot of people are going to want to do something. So that probably will be a very good starting point in terms of watching part 3, for instance, and knowing that there's some very specific resources that people can look at. Morning. This is my partner who runs my business.
Morning.
She's the co-owner of the business. She just woke up. Now she's gonna do some juicing. So we'll probably conclude the blab. Let me see. I'll see whether or not I can take the blab to another room, maybe. But let's see. So if anyone has any questions right now at this very moment, we'll probably answer them and make sure that you get your critical questions out of the way. Let's see here. That's good. That's ready for part 3. Okay. Yeah, so that's what we're gonna do. Part 3. Hopefully tomorrow, no later than Tuesday, we'll do a part 3. And yeah, just you're welcome to just jump on in, and we'll talk about some very specifics, organizations that could help with networking, with putting together the pieces. If you own a business, you want to work with accountants and bookkeepers. You want to work with people who are going to help you ship, maybe do shipping and receiving, you know, website development, all of the various services that go into developing or having a support infrastructure. So that's what we're probably going to look at. Some very specific resources that people can take advantage of. So let's see. I think that's going to be it for today. I think I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. And so tomorrow, I don't have a specific time, but usually for me, it's better probably in the mornings, 9, 10 o'clock, like this time. And then in the evenings, maybe 4 or 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock or something like that. So if you want to, you know, check and keep an eye out for it, anyone who's following us will always send out the notices, the tweets and such, and see if we can give you guys a heads up. Okay, hope we can give you enough of a heads up. Usually I spend a certain amount of time just off the record promoting the blab, and then we go on the record and then and record things. So you have a little bit of time from the point where you get a notification on Twitter or something, up until you actually get a chance to actually be chime in and everything. So we appreciate you following, definitely. And bring a friend, relative, enemy, associate, anybody back with you, so that we can help disseminate the word about what we're talking about, and see if we can get some input, feedback, whatever, comments, criticism. If that's part of it, that's fine. Regarding this particular topic, okay. So it's a pleasure having you guys aboard, and look at the playbacks. Give me some input if you want, and then we'll see if we can integrate all of that into the next one. Okay, all right. So again, we appreciate it, and it was a pleasure, and we'll be talking soon. Okay, take care. Bye.